Welcome back, everyone, to the Cigar Smoke Filled Back Room. I am Doug with Tusk Consulting. TuskConsulting@gmail.com. TuskConsulting@gmail.com. If you are a pro-gun Republican and you need political consulting help, drop me a line at that email address. We'll see how we can help you. If you are not a pro-gun Republican, I'm not going to help you at all. In the ongoing video series of things that are not discussed enough in politics, or at least not discussed honestly enough in politics, today we're going to talk about the Partisan Voting Index. What it is, what it means, how it is relevant, and why you should care about it. Before we get too far into the video today, the cigar of the day is a Diesel. This is one of their Whiskey Row series, the bourbon barrel aged, and the bottle of the day, which cannot be hidden in this landscape format, is a Willet 4-year rye, which I have here in my nice little Willet glass. Certainly one of my favorites. Anyhow, Partisan Voting Index. So, what is the Partisan Voting Index? Generally speaking, it is when all things are equal in a particular district or in a particular state, which side should win and by approximately how much. Now, before I get it. Things are often not all else equal. Different candidates, you got an incumbent, maybe there's a scandal. A lot of things can shape the battlefield, but generally speaking, all else equal, Republicans have, this percent advantage, or Democrats have that percent advantage in a given district or a given state. Now, think of it kind of like sports teams when you're wagering on a game. Cleveland's playing Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's favored by 3 points. Now, that's the line, right? And if you're wagering, you take that into consideration. Now, clearly, on any given day, any given team can beat any other team. But what they're doing there is they're setting a bar. They're setting an expectation that says the consensus, the smart way, looking at history, crunching the numbers, says Cincinnati should win by 3. Okay. You may agree with that. You may disagree with that. But that is kind of, that's where the line is set. Again, a lot of factors can change that. Incumbency is a huge advantage. A well-run campaign can make a difference, right? You can overcome a partisan voting index that favors the other side if you have a very well-run campaign. You have a good candidate, good issues, etc. Lots of money. Money is a tool in politics. Get used to it. A lot of different analysts define the partisan voting index, let's see, in different ways. Probably the most common PVI that's cited is the Cook PVI. The Cook PVI averages the last 2 presidential elections for any given state or district and uses that as the partisan voting index that they calculate. Now, it used to be it was an equal weighting of average. Now, as I understand it, they take the more recent of the last 2 presidential results and give that a 75% weighting, and the more distant of the past 2 presidential results give it a 25% weighting. Regardless, that is not the only way to calculate a PVI. It's just the one that is most commonly cited in media stories, and political consultants will often cite it. Candidates sometimes will talk about it, etc. It's the one people know. But there's lots of others out there. And of course, you can do your own analysis and come up with your own partisan voting index. But regardless, let's stay with Cook for a minute. Once they've crunched their numbers, and they have a little more analysis as well, they typically will throw each district or state, U.S. Senate race in a state, into one of a series of categories. And those categories are toss-up, leaning Republican or Democrat, leaning Republican or leaning Democrat, and then likely Republican and likely Democrat. And while they don't associate hard numbers with them, this is just their analysis, and certainly their PVI enters into that, whether it's a toss-up or a lean or a likely, and which way it is. Those are very useful categories to hold on to. Because a lot of times, especially with the redistricting that happened just not that long ago, people get a big twist over what is considered competitive or not. Okay? Personally, I think of any district that is within plus or minus 5 percentage points of neutral. So, as a toss-up. So, if it's a Republican +3 district or a Democrat +2, and you'll see these sometimes abbreviated as R +3 or D +2, that is within the plus or minus 5% of neutral that I would think of as a toss-up district. Again, personally, from just my own crunching of numbers, I think of something that's between 5 and 10% leaning one way or the other as a leaning that way. So, a R +7 district or a D +9 district, whatever. Those are lean R or lean D. And then anything greater than 10 points, one way or the other, is likely for that party. And those are fairly self-explanatory labels. But when you are considering, like Cook PVI, for instance, remember, Cook PVI is only taking into account presidential election cycles. Now, there's a couple of drawbacks. There's a lot of good associated with that. That is, presidential cycles are the highest turnout, the greatest interest. You're capturing the largest chunk of the electorate that's going to participate. The trouble is, we have elections in other cycles too. And so if you're running for Congress, let's say in 2022 or 2026, those aren't presidential years. And those midterm election turnout models, we did a video on turnout models, can be very, very different than a presidential election turnout model. Additionally, there's also odd-numbered year elections where we vote for things like mayor, village council, or township trustee, whatever, dog catcher maybe. And those have even more different turnouts than the Cook PVI considers based off of presidential years only. So that's one thing to note about it. Additionally, because Cook PVI is only recalculated every 4 years, it has trouble with things that happen more quickly. For instance, in 2022, the Dobbs decision came down in the summer, and it changed the political landscape. The Democrats, look, I'm a gun guy, right? I'm a pro-gun Republican. But on the life issue, Democrats made hay with the Dobbs decision, big time. They fundraise. Remember, we did a video on hard money. But there's soft money, there's super PACs and hybrid PACs, and there's all kinds of stuff. Anyway, but they fundraised off that issue. They also used that issue to motivate their base to turn out. And part of that was, using the Dobbs decision as a reason to go and do statewide ballot and petition initiatives in states that have those. And that even continued into 2023. And that changed how the turnout model looked, because people that had a particular single issue motivation based on what happened with the Dobbs decision showed up in higher numbers. And that therefore changed things relative to what Cook PVI said it should have been. I'm going to keep mentioning Cook PVI isn't the only one. You can go on like 538.com and they'll have their own partisan voting index. Dave's Redistricting has another partisan voting index. They a lot of times there's general agreement, but there may be variance on certain fine points. Now, why does all this matter? Why do we care about the partisan voting index, and why should you care? Well, we care as political consultants, political operatives, candidates, because decisions get made based off of the PVI long before voters have any say in the matter. That may not sound fair to you, but I'm telling you it's true. If you're smart, you will play in those districts that are the toss-ups, the plus or minus 5% from neutral. That is where a good candidate, a well-run campaign, excellent fundraising, those things can move the needle enough to overcome a slight deficit or maybe ensure a very slight advantage leads to victory for your side. Now, if you've got a certain number of districts that you're looking at here, all these toss-up districts, and you've recruited phenomenal candidates for every single one of them, and they've got great campaign managers and phenomenal finance chairs, and they're just killing it out there, knocking the doors. You got all the volunteers directed towards them. Everything's going great. Then maybe you start looking at some of those leaning Democrat districts and say, okay, I think there's a D+6 or D+7 district over here that we can knock off, right? Maybe that ain't as safe as the Democrats think it is. And look, I have seen where D+6, D+7 districts have fallen to our side with a well-run campaign. It can happen, but it is harder. Let's be very clear. Those are harder lifts, right? It's a further stretch goal. The likelies, you're not going to overcome that. Not absent some just tectonic shift, right? Like the incumbent Democrat gets caught in some horrible scandal or something along those. Absent a serious dislocation in the political mechanisms, that just ain't going to happen. The likelies are called likely for a reason. Now, sometimes people will go around saying, hey, we're going to compete and we're going to win in one of these districts that likely for the other side. Why do they do that? And perfectly good example, depending on how you calculate the PVI for Texas, it could be anywhere from a lean Republican to a likely Republican, again, depending on your particular procedure. But it ain't a toss-up state, not by anybody's measure, okay? Not even the most deluded, delirious dreams of the left do they actually think that Texas is a toss-up. It is not. But every presidential election cycle, Democrats start running around saying, we're going to win Texas. They're not going to win Texas. They know they're not going to win Texas. Why do they keep saying that? They say it because they're hoping that some Republicans will get scared enough that they will insist on money being spent in Texas to defend incumbent Republicans. And then there won't be that same dollar available in the toss-up districts where it really matters. Okay? And look, we do it too. With these 2 years, I have heard on talk radio people saying, oh, here in 2024, we're going to win New York State. We're not going to win New York State. I know. The subway crime problem, the protests on campuses, and, et cetera, everything's just terrible, and the people of New York feel it, and they know how I get all that. And there are elected Republicans from New York State, but we're not going to win the state of New York in a presidential cycle. The state of New York, even though Donald Trump's from New York, is not voting for Donald Trump. Just get over it, okay? Why do we say it? Because we're hoping that certain Democrats in New York will believe enough of that to be scared to demand that dollars be spent in New York State where they can't help Joe Biden in competitive states like Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Georgia and Arizona. Because if they spend an extra $1 million or $10 million in New York State, and New York State is an expensive state to advertise in, to run TV commercials in, right? So is Texas, right? Expensive state media market-wise. Now those same $10 million that you wasted in New York State is not available for the Democrats to spend in Minnesota or in Michigan or in Georgia. And that matters. That's why people say those things. It's not because they believe them. It's a psychological operation trying to convince the other side that there's something that we see that they don't. The reality is, informed political operatives know Texas is going Republican and New York's going Democrat. And look, in any hypothetical scenario where Texas actually does turn blue, so much of the rest of the country has already turned blue that it doesn't matter, okay? Same thing with New York State. In a hypothetical where New York State votes Republican, so many other states have already turned red that it doesn't matter, okay? I mean, it's great, it's wonderful. We'd all like to have, a 50-state landslide, whatever. But again, it's not going to happen. And even if it does, it happens as part of something else that is such a tectonic shift, so, completely rearranges the battlefield that there's just nothing for it. And look, speaking of other decisions that get made with this information, I have had candidates call me and say, hey, Doug, I want to run for state rep. And I go, cool, where you live? He tells me where he lives. I look him up. Bro, you're in a D+30 district. Now, there's a lot of reasons that people run for office. It's not always because they're expecting to win. And I know I just blew a lot of minds here. But It's not always the reason why. Sometimes you try to build name ID for some other race in the future. Sometimes they're being a wingman, right? Like I'm running for state rep. I got a buddy running for state senate. If I do a good job running for state rep, in this portion of his senate district, it may increase the turnout enough that he can win the state senate district, even though I probably won't win the state house district. And there's all kinds of other reasons people run. It's really shocking the number of reasons people run other than explicitly to win. But I told him, and look, not every consultant will tell you. I told him, look, dude, you're not going to win. So tell me what the reason, what your why is that you're looking to run, because it can't be that you expect to win. It can't be that. He didn't like hearing that. And look, some consultants won't bother mentioning the partisan voting index when you call them, and they know it's a D+30 district. They know you ain't going to win. They don't mention that to you because they want to get paid. And consultants get paid win, lose, or draw. I try to be honest. I try to tell people, hey, here's the reality. You may not like it, but this is the reality. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't run. That doesn't mean you shouldn't execute a good game plan, because, look, something could happen, right? Your opponent could end up, getting involved in a car accident under questionable circumstances, or who knows, right? Anything's possible. So I'm not saying don't run. I'm saying understand just what you're getting yourself into. Be honest with yourself. I'll be honest with you. You be honest with yourself. Now let's talk about what we can do. But this is an example of partisan voting index making an impact on the decisions people make for running for office. In those toss-up districts, your high-level political operatives are going to recruit their best candidates. They're going to put in the most monetary resources. They're going to steer volunteers to those competitive races. If you're in a D+30 district and you're a pro-gun Republican, I love you, bro. You're not going to get much help. Okay? You're just not. Donors are not going to be writing you the big checks because they know it's a D+30 district. And if they don't, hey, good for you. But trust me, most of the informed higher-end donors know where their money matters and where it doesn't. Okay? You're not going to get the big, slug of volunteers coming to help you because they know that their efforts are better used in a different race. Again, you may not like that, but that is how it is. So, with that, thank you everybody for your attention. Again, I am Doug with Tusk Consulting. This has been about the Partisan Voting Index, and we will see you in the next one.